Thanks for the opportunity to clarify that. So I was preaching a sermon on a passage in the Old Testament about an Old Testament King Uzziah who was stricken with leprosy.
I don't have a lot of time, Counselor. Tell me what you meant by that.
Sure, that many...
You believe that fornication is a form of sexual perversion?
Senator, my personal views, my religious views, what I was speaking at that time were for the edification of the people that I was preaching to. As a judge sitting here today, my obligation is to apply the rule of law.
Yeah, I understand that, but my obligation is to try to understand you, because this is a lifetime appointment. Do you believe that fornication, which I assume you mean by that the sex act, is a form of sexual perversion?
Senator, the doctrine of the church that I was at does state that fornication is a sin.
Well, what do you mean by fornication?
Any sexual act outside of the bounds of marriage.
Okay. So you believe premarital sex is a sexual perversion?
Senator, my personal views, as many have said before, I won't comment, but the doctrine of the church that I belong to would...
Is it your doctrine?
I took, as an elder, I took a vow.
Is it your doctrine?
As an elder of the RPCA...
Is it your doctrine?
Senator, my personal views as a judge are not the object of what I would rule upon.
Give me one more minute, please.
All right. Pause it right there. What you just watched is not a gotcha moment. It is not political theater. It is not religious persecution. What you just watched is a United States Senator doing precisely what the Constitution and the Senate advice and consent role require him to do. This is Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana pressing a lifetime judicial nominee on statements that go directly to judgment, worldview, and credibility. And whether people like the questions or not is frankly irrelevant. The American people deserve the answers. Now, let me be very clear at the outset. This is not about attacking faith. This is not about policing sermons. This is not about silencing religious belief. This is about whether someone who has publicly made sweeping moral judgments about marriage, disability, sexuality, and gender roles can convincingly separate those views from the authority of a federal judgeship that will shape lives for decades. Senator Kennedy is doing what too few senators do anymore. He reads the record, he quotes it accurately, and he asks direct questions without euphemism. And if that makes people uncomfortable, that discomfort is not a flaw in the process. It is the point of the process. If you believe judicial nominees should be vetted seriously, not rubber-stamped. If you believe accountability still matters. And if you want clear-eyed civic analysis instead of partisan spin, make sure you like, subscribe, and share this video. Welcome back to America's Civic Lens. And now let's break this down properly.
House, Senator Kennedy.
Mr. Olson, I believe I looked at your resume. You are an elder in the Reformed Presbyterian Church of North America. Is that correct?
I am an ordained elder in the RPCNA. I am not actively serving.
In August of 2015, you gave a sermon at the Second Reformed Presbyterian Church. Do you remember that?
2015, I think that might have been a Sunday school lecture, but I spoke, yes.
During that sermon, you said that marriage was not intended for all people, including, and I'm going to quote your words, our handicapped friends are our persons with physical disabilities that might prevent the robust marriage that we're called to, close quote. Did you say that?
I think I did, Senator, yes.
You believe that folks with handicaps and physical disabilities should not be able to marry?
No, Senator. I was explaining the meaning of Christ's words that some to use Christ's terms, are eunuchs by birth, and explaining that the meaning of that verse in the context of those who are called to singleness, and that there are various reasons why individuals don't get married.
But what about folks who are handicapped or who have developmental disabilities?
I was using that example as an illustration of why some don't get married, not as a kind of reason why someone shouldn't. It was illustrative of the condition in which some find themselves, but certainly not in any stretch of the imagination suggesting that they couldn't or shouldn't, merely that in some cases they don't.
On July 24, 2022, you gave another sermon at the Columbia Reformed Presbyterian Church. Do you remember that?
The Columbus Reformed Presbyterian Church, yes.
You were speaking about sexuality, is that correct?
I gave 2 sermons at that church, and the main topic of both of those was not human sexuality.
In one of them you said, quote, transgenderism, homosexuality, fornication, and all sorts of sexual perversions was a form of hypocrisy from, quote, your words, shame on the inside. Did you say that?
I don't recall the precise wording, but that sounds
What did you mean by that?
Yeah, Senator, thanks for the opportunity to clarify that. So I was preaching a sermon on a passage in the Old Testament about an Old Testament King Uzziah who was stricken with leprosy.
I don't have a lot of time, Counselor. Tell me what you meant by that.
Sure, that many...
Do you believe that fornication is a form of sexual perversion?
Senator, my personal views, my religious views, what I was speaking at that time were for the edification of the people that I was preaching to. As a judge sitting here today, my obligation is to apply the rule of law.
Yeah, I understand that, but my obligation is to try to understand you, because this is a lifetime appointment. Do you believe that fornication, which I assume you mean by that the sex act, is a form of sexual perversion?
Senator, the doctrine of the church that I was at does state that fornication is a sin.
Well, what do you mean by fornication?
Any sexual act outside the bounds of marriage.
Okay. So you believe premarital sex is a sexual perversion?
Senator, my personal views, as many have said before, I won't comment, but the doctrine of the church that I belong to would...
Is it your doctrine?
I took, as an elder, I took a vow.
Is it your doctrine?
As an elder of the RPCA...
Is it your doctrine?
Senator, my personal views as a judge are not the object of what I would rule upon.
Give me one more minute, please, Mr. Chairman. On August the 23rd, 2015, you spoke in Sunday school, and you said, quote, I'm not saying women can't have careers. That's not what I'm saying. No, strike that. I'm reading the wrong quote. I apologize. In your talks at your Sunday school, you said that God, quote, has called wives to be subject to their husband, end quote, and to, quote, serve the good of your husband and support his calling, close quote. Did you say that?
I gave a couple Sunday school lectures around that time. I don't recall the particular one, but I think I recall saying something along those lines.
What did you mean by that?
So in Christian marriage, as explained by the apostles, I was describing our church's understanding of what Christian marriage ought to look like.
And you believe Christian marriage provides that women have to be subservient to their husbands?
Senator, I think I was quoting either a passage in Ephesians or those are not my words. Those are words in the
Well, you
scriptures
said them.
that
Do
I
you
was.
believe them?
Senator, I believe every word of the Bible.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Olson, can I just follow up on that, since he raised interesting questions? But let me just ask you, you're an ordained elder.
Now that we watched the full exchange, here's what actually happened. Stripped of emotion, stripped of outrage culture, and grounded in civic reality. First, Kennedy's core objective was clarity, not condemnation. Watch the structure of Kennedy's questioning. He does not interrupt recklessly. He does not misquote. He does not caricature the nominee's beliefs. He does three very specific things. He cites exact sermons, dates, and locations. He asks whether the statements were made. He asks what the nominee actually believes today. That is not harassment. That is due diligence. When Mr. Olson acknowledges that he did, in fact, say marriage was not intended for all people, including people with disabilities, Kennedy does not leap to conclusions. He asks the obvious follow-up. Do you believe folks with handicaps and physical disabilities should not be able to marry? That is a fair question, a necessary question, a responsible question. And notice what happens next. Second, the nominee repeatedly avoids plain answers. This is the most telling part of the exchange. Over and over again, Mr. Olson retreated behind three shields. That was illustrative. That was church doctrine. My personal views are irrelevant as a judge. But here's the problem, and Senator Kennedy knows this. You cannot simultaneously publicly preach moral absolutes, take vows affirming those doctrines, and then claim total neutrality when elevated to judicial power. That is not how credibility works. Kennedy is not asking him to renounce his faith. He is asking him to own his words. Third, on sexuality, Kennedy exposes a real tension. When the discussion turns to homosexuality, transgenderism, and fornication, the nominee again attempts to separate himself from his own sermons. But Kennedy presses, correctly, on definitions. What do you mean by fornication? Do you believe premarital sex is a sexual perversion? These are not trick questions. These are worldview questions. And the reason they matter is simple. Judges interpret laws through human judgment. Pretending otherwise insults the intelligence of the public. If a nominee believes large categories of lawful adult behavior are moral perversions, even if framed as church doctrine, it is entirely legitimate for senators to probe how that belief might intersect with equal protection, due process, and civil rights jurisprudence. Kennedy does not accuse. He asks. Fourth, the marriage and gender roles exchange is the smoking gun. When Kennedy raises a nominee's statements about wives being subject to their husbands, this is not about theology. It is about power. Federal judges rule on workplace discrimination, family law implications, gender-based claims, constitutional equality. So yes, it matters whether a nominee believes, even doctrinally, that women are subordinate by design. Kennedy's question is direct. Do you believe Christian marriage provides that women have to be subservient to their husbands? The answer is telling, not because of what is said, but because of what is not said. The nominee does not say, no, women are equal under the law. He says, those are words from Scripture. And Kennedy closes the loop. You said them. Do you believe them? That is not hostility. That is accountability. Final point. This is what serious governance looks like. Here is the uncomfortable truth for many viewers. Senator John Kennedy is doing what the Senate is supposed to do, but often avoids because it's politically inconvenient. He is not grandstanding. He is not yelling. He is not demonizing religion. He is calmly, methodically testing whether a nominee's public record aligns with the impartiality required of a lifetime appointment. If a nominee cannot answer simple yes or no questions about their own statements, that is not a failure of the senator. That is a failure of candor. You do not get to step into one of the most powerful unelected positions in America and demand immunity from scrutiny. And on this point, whether you are conservative, liberal, religious, or secular, Senator John Kennedy is right. That is not partisanship. That is civic responsibility. This is America's civic lens.